joining us in a beautiful sunny afternoon in Barcelona. We really appreciate that you are not outside, but inside with us, right? So I want to just now invite you to first complete this pre-survey, right? The survey will help us to later on group you into different groups, right? And also to understand your starting point in terms of your positions, right, regarding AI agents and deliberation. So whereas we're connecting our online speakers. All right, now can I invite all the speakers to the stage? I want to do a quick introduction of everybody. Okay. All right. Yeah. Please sit down. There's more and more chair over here. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining again. My name is Wei Yu. I am a communication scholar from National University of Singapore. There, I founded and still run a research lab called the Civic Tech Lab. So I'm very glad today that we're going to talk about AI agents and the future of deliberation, designing human-AI collaboration for democratic dialogues. Today with me, we have my long-term collaborator, Professor Simon Perret from Telecom Paris Institute. We have been working on deliberation and technology for quite a few years, right? I'm also very glad to introduce my PhD student, Kaiyao Zhang, who will be presenting on one of the simulation experiments we have done before. Another long-term collaborator on deliberation and technology, Professor Anna Delido from the Open University. Anna is going to share a lot of fantastic projects she has run on using AI to facilitate deliberation. We also have our new collaborator, Dr. Morris Fletchner, and also Professor Francesco Verri, who is unfortunately not able to be here because he missed his flight. So Dr. Morris is going to introduce his AI simulation experiments. Last but not least, we have definitely Dr. Jose Raman from Stanford University. Jose Raman is representing the Stanford team to talk about deliberation.io, a very cool project that uses AI as part of deliberation technology as well, right? So with this team, let me first start by introducing what is deliberation. I hope everyone knows what is deliberation. Who doesn't know what deliberation means? If you don't know or you happen to forget, let me remind you that Jürgen Habermas, right, in 1996, in the book called Between Facts and Norms, actually clearly defines deliberation. He said deliberation is a process of public reasoning among free and equal citizens. So deliberation is a mode of decision-making for democratic decisions. So participants would have to justify their views and positions with reasons that are mutually acceptable. So through this procedure, people build mutual respect, and eventually their collective decisions would have some kind of legitimacy in the society. So that's Jürgen Habermas' definition of deliberation. We are a group of researchers who tried to use information and communication technologies to realize this ideal called deliberation. In 2015, Anna and I, along with a group of other scholars, we actually organized a workshop on designing deliberation technologies and processes in CHI 2015 in South Korea. Right? That was our first time to gather together to talk about this issue. Now, fast forward 10 years later, we felt that we're now at another critical moment to talk about this issue again, how artificial intelligence would completely change the way we build deliberation technologies. So here are some examples. You have seen multimodal reflective nudges. If you go through the CHI publications over the years, right? You have seen agent-based modeling, digital twins or personas that mimic human reasoning. Last year, Science published a very controversial paper on Habermas machine. I heard that Habermas wrote to Science himself to context the idea whether the machine is indeed a Habermasian, right? So we have also other very useful technologies such as AI translation that allow us to deliberate among multilingual and multicultural participants. So with all these technologies, I think it's time for us to collectively reflect on which roles we hope AI to play in deliberation procedures, which roles AI should never play in the deliberation procedure. So here are some approaches we offer you to think about. First, at the one side of the spectrum, we will strictly restrict AI to the role of facilitations, right? So AI probably can help human moderators to summarize the discussions, probably can help the participants to check the basic truthfulness of the information they have received during the deliberation, but AI will play a peripheral role in this procedure of deliberation. On the other hand, at the other side of the spectrum, we have seen ideas and proposals that want to use AI as substitute of human deliberators, right? So on the one hand, you could use AI to generate all kinds of reasoning. You don't need humans, right? And see how different reasons can converge. We also have started to see people, including ourselves, right, experimenting with artificial intelligence agents to mimic or simulate real personas and see how these personas, when they are put together and discuss an issue, right, how they perform compared to human deliberators. Of course, there's always a middle approach. The middle approach, we call it an AI augmentation approach. So here, AI will play a very significant role, but this deliberation procedure will never be fully just AI. It will always have humans in the loop. So these three approaches, I hope just now the link asks you your views on these approaches. If you can, please answer that survey so we can later on have an activity. So here's the plan of today's panel, right? We are going to start with 5 very short lightning talks. So each of them will introduce the most cutting edge or most recent projects involving AI. After the talks, one of the speakers will be actually online, right? So after the talks, we're going to go into a debate phase. Right? I know some of you a little bit worried about participation. Please don't. There's a purpose of this participation phase because we have our already pre-run AI deliberation. That means we have already asked AI agents to deliberate on the same issue. We're going to ask you to deliberate later on. So after your deliberation, we're going to submit your discussions immediately to analysis and generate a score to compare your human deliberations quality with the pre-generated AI deliberation quality. So we can have a quick view about how capable AI in terms of simulating human deliberation on the same issues, right? So then the panel will end with a synthesis, right, a concluding remarks. So that's the plan for today's panel. Without further ado, I want to now invite our first speaker, Anna. Anna has been working on this issue for many, many years. She will bring a lot of exciting ideas and projects to the floor. Please, Anna. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wei Yu. And thank you all to be here. at the end of a long and interesting day. So I'm Anna Delito, and I'm a professor of human-computer interaction at the Open University in Milton Keynes. Today I will present, and I would like to talk to you about two main things: democracy and scale. So recent events show that democracy is increasingly needed, but at the same time, democratic processes are becoming increasingly rare. So when democratic innovation exists, they usually happen in a very analog way, with people protesting in streets or gathering in small community groups, and very rarely they are facilitated by technologies. At the same time, though, we see social media and AI becoming completely pervasive, scaling everywhere, anywhere. And unfortunately, these technologies tend to harness rather than facilitate democratic processes. So this brings to a crucial question, democracy and scale are two completely incompatible concepts, or actually we can design for deliberative democratic processes that scale, and they can scale democratically across culture, people, places, and environments. This is the object of two key projects that I want to talk to you about, and two technologies that I want to show you. So the first project is Orbis. It's a European project with 14 different partners across Europe: university, NGO, civic society organization, and companies. And what we did in Orbis in the last 4 years, we created AI-powered technologies for deliberative democracy. In my lab, we in particular further developed a platform called because.app. This is a free platform. You can go to that link and please feel free to use it. So this platform was, you can imagine it as an online discussion platform, but augmented with AI support. So AI in Because acts in 3 different ways. So it acts as a broker, as a moderator, and also as an analyst. So AI as a broker means that AI solutions have been designed and implemented in Because to link people between different interaction spaces. So picture, for example, this use case. You are, a community organization. How can you bridge your small group face-to-face, very engaging interaction with 20 people in a room or 10 people in a room to a larger online deliberation group? So in Because, you can take the transcript of live events that comes as unstructured text, and this can be imported into structured dialogue so that they can continue for online discussion on Because. The key things of this import is the curation workflow that we set up and design that puts human in complete control. So what happened is that at the stage of the import, the AI structured this unstructured text in argument structure. So it lifts different position, argument, it links them, argument in favor and against. At that stage, the user importing the transcript can play with the control parameters. So he can decide, I want this number of ideas, I want to stress more the counter argument rather than the argument, so that he can adjust the AI analysis. When the AI analysis is ready, then there is an approval process. 1 minute, oh geez. So, so anyway, and this process is also logged to ensure transparency and accountability. Another way to use to bridge is bridging the gap between geomapping and online deliberation. So Because as a Telegram bot with which people can record, for example, issues happening in the street, and then these issues are then showed in Because as geomaps and could be linked to further community discussion, just bridging kind of deliberation in the street with deliberation online. AI as moderator, on the other hand, happen when we scale deliberation in a different dimension. So as we look at asynchronous deliberation involving a very large number of people, the conversation can become very, very dividing. So how can we actually help a more constructive debate online? We took this approach in identifying basically where harmful dialogue patterns arise in the discussion, and we designed with other partners in the Orbit project the card of clarity. These are also, freely available. And what are those? They are 10 different harmful patterns of dialogue that can lead to conflicts. So what happened is that the AI, when you process the conversation, is identifying where these 10 patterns arise, then automatically flags them, but it doesn't stop there. Basically, it suggests specific facilitation action that the moderator, even the untrained one, can activate in the debate, so that this dialogue harmful dynamic could prevent the conflicts from arising rather than solving it. I don't know if I have got further time, but there is AI as an analyst, because there's also a lot of analysis, such as policy recommendation and different forms of topic analysis that support sense-making of large-scale debates. Finally, the other project, just briefly mentioning, is multilingual, multicultural space for political deliberation. In this project, we are working with a different platform, and we are going taking the challenge of scaling deliberation to the hardest level. So scaling deep toward multicultural, multilingual deliberation, and doing so synchronously. So we are moving aside from asynchronous deliberation and focusing on how AI can help deliberation that are live, like the one we are living now. But I'm not going to have the time to show you what we have done, because my 5 minutes are over, but perhaps there will be a chance later on. Thank you. What is going on?
So much interesting stuff we're missing out on. My name is Maurice Flechner, and since Francesco's not here, I'm going to present both of our works, since Francesco is my PhD supervisor. Actually, I'm still a PhD candidate, unfortunately not a PhD yet. Anyways, we're both at the University of Zurich and the Center for Democracy in Aarau, and where we really appreciate the developments that Anna proposed, for example. There's also other developments that think about how LLMs could actually participate in deliberation as something close to a human participant, maybe. And while there's very valid normative concerns about these, we were also interested in whether LLMs actually have the capacity to do this. So this is what I'm going to present today. We're evaluating the roles of LLMs and what could be possible. So first, why do we do this? There's already a bunch of collective reasoning benchmarks out there, but they all work on verifiable tasks, like counting the amounts of R's in strawberry, whereas politics usually works with problems that are not verifiable, like how to tackle the problem of climate change, where we don't know what the best solution is, really. So instead, political science had to come up with different ideas of what makes good deliberative reasoning. And the argument here is that good deliberative reasoning is when participants share their ideas, arguments, and viewpoints, and actually build a shared discursive framework, so they evaluate and integrate each other's perspectives to then be able to make more coherent decisions. There's also an index out there that Francesco co-developed called the Deliberative Reason Index that allows us to measure this. This is a bit complicated, but I'll give it a very brief try to explain it. So what it does basically is it's survey-based. You answer a survey. Each survey consists of 2 different sections. One is statements that describe underlying values, arguments, and reasons, and the other section is preferences, very concrete policy choices. Participants rate both of them, and then we calculate the pairwise similarity of consideration answers, consideration ratings between every two participants, and the pairwise similarity of preference answers. And as long as these two similarities are close to each other or ideally exactly the same, the DRI score is high. And as soon as the similarity differs in considerations and preferences, the DRI score goes down. So by this, we're kind of measuring whether these two participants have a consistent understanding, which can be different as long as they disagree on their policy choices as much as on their underlying values. Now, how do we use this to assess LLMs? There's two experiments. The first one conducted by Francesco and another colleague of us, Gustavo Umbellino, where we actually use human DRI surveys that exist. We take their data, their responses, and we pretty much take one LLM agent, tell it to fill in the survey as well, and then assess how consistent the LLM's answers are to the answers of the humans. So this pretty much tells us whether LLM's reasoning patterns are similar to human reasoning patterns. And what we find is that most LLMs, you can see the blue line. Actually, all of the LLMs on the left of the blue line are not significantly different from zero, from random. So you can also just generate random answers, and these models don't produce significant different answers. And then we can also test how consistent they are with human answers. And actually only 4 answers are really consistent with human reasoning patterns on the same surveys, only 4 LLMs. On the other hand, this is an experiment that I worked on mostly. LLMs, we can also ask LLMs to deliberate. So for this, we kind of have a basic deliberative experimental setup where we get the LLMs to answer the DRI survey before a deliberative intervention. Then we run a deliberative intervention. We tell them to deliberate on a topic, and then we run the DRI survey again. So just like we do it with humans. And we also assess the transcripts of these deliberations just for control. With Aqua, which we're actually also going to use later today, this is an automated discourse quality index. So the results here are that with Aqua, the discourse quality looks very similar between humans and LLMs, but it seems that LLMs cannot improve their discursive framework, their intersubjectively consistent understanding of the issue at hand as much as humans can. Actually, only under a normative prompt that explains them exactly what to do and basically nudges them in the right direction, they improve by about 1/3 of what humans would improve on. Interestingly enough, the best performing setup was when we mixed different LLM agents from different models. So this is the mixed R. These are reasoning models. That's the R, what the R stands for, bar. But all of these model-specific statistics are not significant since the numbers weren't high enough for that. So what role can LLMs play in deliberation? We believe that they can definitely be used as a tool for all kinds of tasks that we use LLMs in our everyday life for as well, like summarization, formulation of maybe descriptions of data, explanations, translations. But we cannot assume that LLMs can reliably share a consistent discursive framework or build one, and we also cannot assume that they can consistently hold or update an opinion. So, without further ado, I'm passing on to Kayao, which also did very interesting and very similar research.
Hi everyone, my name is Kayao. I'm a second-year PhD student from National University of Singapore and also a member of Civic Tech Lab. Today I'm going to share one of our lab's ongoing project, Can AI Deliberate? We all know that deliberation is very central to democratic decision-making. However, in reality, it rarely happens under ideal conditions because the structure inequality often excludes many voices. So here are some examples, like in some very important UN meetings, like COP. Many small nations just cannot afford to attend because they don't have the money to send the delegations. While with the rise of LLMs, we now have opportunities to simulate multi-agent discussion. However, we need to ask questions. Can AI actually deliberate rather than just generate some ordinary text? So in this study, we asked, can a large language model demonstrate high deliberative quality, and if so, under what kinds of conditions? And we all know that discourse is very central to the deliberations and even one of the most important components. But different participants will have different communication styles. Some might be very logical, analytic, and some might like using story to elaborate on their own ideas. And some might prefer to like strongly defending their own stance, while some might be more open to change their attitude during the debates. So that's how we set up our experiment. We have 2 factors, 4 conditions, and we simulate multi-agent discussion using GPT-4o minis with 7 agents engaging in up to 40 rounds of dialogue across 3 topics, like AI art, voting rights, and climate policies. And we also use AutoGen framework from Microsoft to manage agent interactions, including law assignments, prompt configurations, and dialogue coordinations. And how we evaluate our results, we use DQI, the Deliberative Quality Index, across 5 aspects, justification, contents, respect, constructiveness, and interactivities. And also, we measure the stance flow. First is the difference in support, where agents change their stance from the beginning to the end. And also, we measure the externality, where the reasoning shift from self-interest to broader public concern from the beginning to the end. And let's review the result. Can AI deliberate? For the reasoning styles, it really matters. So the analytic styles provides clear inferential chains and translate value into concrete policy design, which leads to higher respect, which means whether opposing views are acknowledged and treated with civility, and also higher constructiveness, which means whether discussion generates concrete proposal. And while in the storytelling styles broaden contents, which means whether justification are narrow or extend to broader collective goods. So it broadens contents by incorporating life experiences and societal values. However, it have less procedural details. And also, no matter agents in low or high certainty, they don't change their stance. So that's quite surprising. However, it does change the reasoning. So those in the higher certainty conditions, they provide stronger arguments with explicit object reply sequences, which lead to higher justifications, which means whether claims are supported by reasons, and also interactivities. But they show slightly lower respect. Well, there's no change in support, but there's higher externalities under high certainties with more public-oriented reasoning. So all in all, analytic and high certainty combination perform the best, even though we all like story or hearing stories from others or telling stories, but that's a result shows that storytelling and low certainty combined perform the weakness. So here's a takeaway. AI does not naturally deliberate. The best outcomes emerge when structures and conviction combines. And that's imaging, we now know how to make deliberation, like AI deliberation, have higher quality. And that's imagine what if we combine the personas. So here is an ideas and also our ongoing projects that we want to design this kind of platform which not only that AI agents deliberate themselves, but we also want to enable humans to deliberate with multiple AI agents. So imagine that those small nations who can afford like higher training fee, they can use this kind of platform to let their people to deliberate and practice their deliberation skills before they come to the real deliberations. And UN really love our ideas and even give an award to these ideas. So we know that we are all like funding a formula what kind of what should deliberative AI should be look like, and we are quite optimistic about this, and we believe that AI can also like be a very active participant in deliberation. So feel free to contact us if you have like similar interest, and we are like also seeking some like cooperations in the future. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, great. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Wei Yu, for organizing this great panel. And it's great to joining such a great lineup, especially since a lot of people here have been working on this space for a long time. I'm Jose Ramon Enriquez. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Stanford Digital Economy Lab. And I've been working on a project called deliberation.io. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our vision and also the work that we have been doing in the past 2 years. This work is joined also with MIT. So in the past 2 years, we have been working with them in developing and testing this platform. So we entered this space about 3 years ago when we first recognized that AI will have a tremendous, transformative power, but also a disruptive power on the way we make collective decision making. And the idea that was in the back of our minds is that technology shocks actually cause mixed results in the way we as a communities make decisions. And we were thinking particularly with what happened with social media, which initially was a big promise, but eventually faded away. Thinking on this, we outlined 4 core principles on how we presented our work and how we guided our work. We recognize that for each of these particular principles, there are trade-offs and challenges, but we wanted to guide our work in 4 principles. The first one being agency. So here, the idea is that overall, we like to preserve human choice. So it is great that we can make it easier for humans to digest information, to make it easier to take decisions and have the menu of options for them, but the final decisions should be in human hands. Of course, it is really hard to implement, as we've been hearing all day about all the particular challenges with AI. In particular, you can think of over-reliance. But not only that, we can think of AI as expanding the frontier of tasks that human can do. So it is actually challenging just to think about what is the correct benchmark if humans were not conducting those type of tasks before. Our second principle is mutual respect. So the idea is to encourage civil conversation and civil interactions without actually washing out the preferences. So respecting the divergence of the participants in conversations and in deliberations. The third part is actually equality and inclusion. And the idea here is that in-person deliberation happen to be captured by loud voices, by elites, even by particular goods. So we learned from that. There's actually a few examples out there. For example, community-driven development, which was a big project pushed by the World Bank that eventually faded away because there were very small groups taking over all this in-person decision-making. So we wanted to take another chance and look at AI as a new opportunity to level the playing field. Then the fourth principle is augmenting citizenship. So here the idea is actually trying to complement how humans make decisions, to complement their abilities, their skills, and the actual set of tasks that they can do. But it is really important to focus on what citizenship is, because here we're thinking on citizenship as something that can be executed only when you're in a collective setting and not as an individual. So it is important to mention that what we are trying to do here is not just maximizing at the individual participant level, but actually from the entire experience as a collective. Okay. So what we have been doing on deliberation.io, which is a modular platform that will be released as open source code so that everyone can use it and actually adjust it for their own purposes at the local level, is two things. So first is to generate a collection of knowledge so that all researchers and practitioners can actually take the platform, adjust it for their own purposes, and actually understand what works, what doesn't work, and what can backlash in particular settings. The second purpose of our platform is to use it at scale and for real decision making in real conditions. So for this, we're trying to make the platform as intuitive, lightweight, and cost-effective as possible. And that's why we've been, in the past year, having some collaborations with governments, not only in the US, but outside the US, including national governments. So here, I'm just listing a few lab experiments that we've done, and we've collected some evidence of how we are thinking about the entire pipeline from understanding your own perspectives, then being exposed to other people's opinions, then making a decision and collectively going into suggested policy, a space where everyone can actually make decisions. So for more information, see directly deliberation.io.
All right, now we're going to move to our online presentation from Professor Horacio.
Start, or
Yes.
will you share the screen, or shall I?
Yes. No, we can. I think we can do that. Can he see? Yeah. It should be. Yeah, loading. Yeah, it's just a bit slow. One second.
Yes, no problem. So I let you know when I need the next one, right?
Yeah. Do you want me to
Great.
You can stay if you. Okay. Yeah. It was good.
I can do it if you want.
That's next slide.
Yeah, I can see Jose Ramon Enriquez's slide now. Yeah, fantastic. So, shall I start? Okay. Thank you very much, Wei-Yu, for organizing this fantastic panel, and thank you to all the presenters for their presentations of projects that are extremely interesting for me. Also, hello to all the audience. My name is Horacio Sajon. I come from Universitat Pompeu Fabra here in Barcelona. I apologize because I was unable to attend in person due to other commitments that I have today. The idea is to present a little bit the EDEM project, Innovative and Inclusive Democratic Spaces for Deliberation Participation. Is a little bit different from the type of research that my colleagues have presented. Next slide, please. So the motivation for our project is that well, we know that deliberative democracy aims at achieving consensus through the discussion of specific topics that affect the community that are discussing these topics. And in this context, access to understandable information is one prerequisite. However, we all know that in democratic debate, in participatory processes, information can be extremely complicated to understand, not only the procedures for participation in democracy, but also the topic at the stake, the topic that is going to be discussed. Additionally, usually in deliberation, one expects an argumentative capacity from the people who participate. That means the ability to articulate the discourse and to communicate properly and with certain standards. And therefore, these characteristics make that several people are excluded from democratic processes, in particular from deliberation, on topics that finally will affect them, will affect their lives. So, for example, people with some intellectual disability who are unable to understand complex text or unable to express themselves in enough qualitative argumentation. People who are migrants and do not speak the language of the community yet, but want to be integrated, will struggle with the language of the country. And therefore, the objective of our project that is called EDEM is a project funded by the European Commission under the Horizon Europe program, is to address barriers in deliberative and participatory democratic practices, in particular related to language complexity. Therefore, in order to address this challenge, what we are doing is to develop natural language processing models which are able to simplify multilingual documents and make them more accessible so that they can be used in democratic processes. So we are also developing realistic use cases that involve deliberation with our target citizens, and to show that it is possible to include them in a democratic debate. And by this way, we are addressing the inequalities that currently exist in deliberation and participation in democratic spaces. Our consortium is formed, as you can see probably in the map, is composed of 12 partners across 7 European countries. So we have research institutions, we have universities, we have software developers, experts in facilitating communication, ONGs, organizations working for the rights of people with disabilities, and so on. Next slide, please. Our take on is the next one, please. Our take on the project, so the main activities that we carry out in the project, is first to identify what are the barriers that are currently occurring in deliberation for people with language difficulties. We also work on creating data that contain complex data and also their facilitated counterparts in order to assess text simplification systems. We develop natural language processing methods for simplifying text in 4 different languages. We are developing together with users inclusive spaces for deliberation. These are not only digital spaces, but also physical spaces. We are providing support through the development of an application, a mobile application, and implementing and evaluating use cases. Next slide, please. So, next slide, please. We are, at the moment, we have finalized one experiment, a democratic experiment, so one use case in Spanish, in a city near Madrid, where people from different groups, older adults, migrants, and people with intellectual disability have debated in several sessions about the services and benefits offered by the municipality and how to improve them. We have currently another use case in the city of Bologna, also involving migrants and people with intellectual disability. This use case is in Italian. We will soon start a use case in the city of Barcelona, in Catalan and Spanish, discussing improvements to urban spaces and the city. And we will have a use case in Malta, addressing the difficulty of communication from the government to the people with disabilities. So next slide, please. So what role should artificial intelligence play in human deliberation? For me, they can improve text accessibility to democratic deliberation. In this sense, they can be facilitators, producing adapted versions of documents, summarizing information, as was mentioned before, clustering ideas and opinions, providing explanations of difficult topics that need to be debated, answering questions. They can also help us text producers or helping articulate ideas for debate, for example, or drafting conclusions from a particular debate. But I think that in all these contexts, we always need the human in the loop to assess that the deliberation goes in the right direction and it doesn't jeopardize the views of some participants. So next slide. Thank you very much from the Eden project, and I hope the panel will be fruitful for everyone attending. Thank you very much.
Of the presentation phrase. Maybe we can take a few quick questions before we break into the debate phase. Anyone wants to ask burning questions to the panel?
Do we have any question from the audience? So we have a microphone over here if you want to ask. Any question, any comments? Anyone?
Because I know not everyone might want to stay for the debate phase. That's why I open a quick Q&A. Of course, if you're ready, let's go into this phase. Are you ready? Yeah? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Fantastic. But a quick reminder that I know there are only like 17 people who answered our pre-survey, right? But that's fine. So let's quickly go through what we're going to do. We're going to divide everybody into 3 groups. One will focus on AI as facilitator, another augmenters, and the third one substitutes, right? We're going to give you some role play cards, so you are not going to speak from who actually you are, but from different roles, right? That's why actually it's supposed to give you more freedom to think through the procedure. We have 3 debate questions. You can, as a group, choose just one to focus on, right? First one on how should we design human-AI deliberation, collaboration. Second one on HCI frameworks used to ensure ethical legitimacy. Third one is how can we make sure authenticity is there when AI-generated arguments are used, right? So maybe can I invite everybody who decided to participate in this phase to come to the front of the room?
So we need you guys to start grouping up and we'd like you choose a topic. So again, AI as facilitator or AI as augmenters or substitutes. So we talk about the roles. So you can just join one randomly, and where you and Kayo and I will just basically be organizing the groups. So I will be in charge of augmenters, where you as substitutes, and Kayo as facilitators here. Right. I will be going over here. If you want to join me, it's okay. I don't bite. Sorry? Augmenter. Yes. Nice. Joining me? Yes. Can you just try to come a bit closer? Thank you. Augmenters, yes, indeed. That's me. Oh yeah, I need to do one more thing. Just. Okay. Hello.
Yeah. You could use. Just open your laptop and join. All right, we have about 20 minutes for the debate. Then after that, we are going to run a quick analysis of our debate results and compare it to AI deliberation.
It's okay. I mean, it's not very formal, so it's nice seeing you. So yes, you guys can sit, obviously. Hello. Mine is augmenters.
Augmenters.
Yes.
Where is the facilitator?
Facilitators where's Caio?
Caio.
Yeah, Caio over here.
English?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Which city?
Yeah, that's a good idea as well.
We sort of sit around the table. Okay.
North or south? Haven't visited. Yeah.
A little bit of we should criticize it. We should not just blindly accept it, but
Yeah, maybe that is.
it can bring a lot of logical discussions to the table that humans will not usually remember to bring them up. So I think it's helpful, but it has to be heavily
First thing first, we
regulated.
have to choose the rule paths. How many of you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? We actually only have 7 rows. You can choose, maybe some of you can pick 2 rows at the same time. Yeah, there's one researcher, regulator, citizens, civil society. So you don't have to, you don't want to be a researcher. It's so boring, right?
That's the one I want. And you want to change the people deliberating, or do we want the list of reasons?
That's a good question. Yes, so...
Do you want to be an AI developer?
That makes sense.
All right, so you all have chosen your role.
When you do
Okay,
deliberation,
maybe the first round of the discussion is to ask you to read out your role so everybody knows who each other is. Right? Maybe I start from you, right?
Okay, policy maker, what you are, develop all those policies.
It's a balance, so the process matters, but ultimately we're trying to pull out what people think and not just AI should not be contributing directly to the discussion. It should be people's ideas being what's the term I'm looking for? Just being zoomed into. So that it's people ideas that matter, and AI just helps bring it out and not
Great.
We are the regulators. We are going to regulate the hell out of certain places. We ensure that you comply with laws and standards that we establish and formulate. And we really care about compliance and accountability.
Okay.
And risk mitigation and transparency. Yes. Thank you. And we want to prevent misuse and
The thing
harm.
that
We have a troll
really,
here.
surprised me when working in this area is that
All right,
whoever
thank you,
I talk to
regulators. Can we
has
move
the
to-
same
I will be the civil society
idea.
actor.
So we want AI for deliberation to be supportive, to be augmenting or, kind of facilitating AI ideas, not replacing them. But then, the most of the AI support for deliberation nowadays, they usually tend not to support.
Take your shirt off.
We design and build AI systems like conversational agents and recommendation systems, focusing on implementation and deployment, so system performance, but also usability, technical feasibility, that sort of thing.
Great, thank you.
So I'm a researcher studying AI ethics, social impact of technology. I care about theoretical frameworks
Which number? Three. Okay. Is that one about authenticity? Oh my gosh, I love that one. Right. How can then HCI frameworks uphold ethical legitimacy? No, sorry. What constitutes authenticity when AI generated arguments and public? Now, if we fully rely on AI generated arguments to provide us decision making, how do we make sure these arguments are authentic? So I have some pumping questions here. Maybe I can just provide you as the starting points for thinking. For instance, does authenticity come from humans only? Is authenticity a concept that's only humans are capable to provide? So what do we mean by authenticity in the first place? What is human authenticity? And if we want to replicate that in AI, what does it mean?
As a regulator, I would want to have a peer definition. No, I'm actually looking at the researcher. Well, regulators always look at AI developers, which is I die. As a regulator, I would want to have a clear metric or clear criteria about authenticity so that I can regulate. I can say that these systems need to follow authenticity. And it's important that they would come from researchers and would also be supported by the citizens. They should sort of agree with that. And then when I have that in place, then I can, would 10% off of annual revenue sound like a good number for these kind of things? So yes, then I can regulate. But I first need to understand what authenticity is. I don't want to think so. Please tell me.
Yeah, experts.
As a researcher, I think like we are up for data-driven decision making or evidence-based approach. So everything should be, all evidence should be scientific valid in terms of papers, data. So if these kind of decisions can be verified with scientific findings,
there is this human oversight. So I heard you say human oversight. So I'm now fixated on this idea that any argument that goes out to represent other humans need to be oversight by a human to check that this truly sounds like an argument that could be made by a human.
So then maybe as a facilitator, ask a further question: that who will be the ones verifying these AI arguments?
As a regulator, I don't.
You don't care.
I don't. I say that there needs to be a human oversight, and then we go to the court if I'm not happy about the outcomes. But I'm not going to be more specific.
Okay. So whatever you decide, I can enforce it as a police officer.
Whatever. Regulators decide. Okay. Actually, I would, Jose Raman raised a really great point. I just want to push on that a little bit. What if the arguments are so perfect? Actually, the groups they are supposed to represent cannot come up with that argument themselves. Is that considered as an authentic representation? Yeah. What if AI is doing a better job than actually the group is supposed to represent? The group doesn't reach that kind of level of understanding regarding the issue.
I don't care as a regulator. As long as a human check that it looks like a human-made thing, I am happy.
What if they rate the AI as more human than human?
Right.
Is that accurate, or are you just checking whether it's less?
Don't ask me the questions like that. Just put there the human to check to check everything, and then we are happy. And then if it doesn't work, then we go to court because then I say that you didn't follow the rules that I set up. You understand?
That's it. I can do that one.
Right. Okay. Regulators only care about this. Some kind of humans in this. Maybe we change the question to: is that a way maybe we can categorize humans or different kinds of humans into different groups of humans who can supervise or who can monitor AI arguments? Would you be okay with us discussing that?
Yes, I like this idea about being certified AI controller because then I could have some criteria for the people who go to control. I like this idea really much. How about civic society, researchers, citizens?
Who are eligible to be the human oversight?
Yes, because of course the most horrible thing that the companies could do is that they hire bad humans to control this public opinion who have bad ideas. So we need to have, you are right, we need to have minimal standards that I'm going to establish.
All right, so who wants to be part of that human oversight group? Citizens, do you want to be that part of it? You know, you probably will have to come to the city council every week to go
Not
through
every
a
week.
meeting.
I want you to go through a certification also, at least 3 years
I
of
need
work.
to prove myself I'm human enough.
Right.
Yes.
Oversizing
Yes.
And somebody could pay you.
Yeah.
Well, you are going to pay.
Policymaker.
I can try to convince the higher elites to that, but I need arguments from the civil society.
Yeah, and I believe there are a lot of civil society actors who very much like to be involved in this because there are, even if we represent like, everything we've been saying so far is like we represent simple human as if human was one thing, which is completely bullshit to be honest.
Okay.
There are so many voices, and especially there are so many voices from smaller actors that risk disappearing if they are not directly involved.
That sounds too complex. But I would like to open the discussion with the civic society, the companies, and the researchers establish this criteria about who is a good evaluator of human judgment and how it's going to happen. And then for lobbying efforts and other kind of activities, I'm also opening this side of the door to sort of suggest, provide things, you know, the reading door, the usual things that I'm not going to say out loud.
Yeah, we have a second regulator here who hasn't got a chance to say anything yet. One regulator is already strong enough. maybe you can be the good at regulator.
proud of you doing something like that. And I would invite you to Brussels to attend to any events.
All right, so do we have a decision? Actually, I checked the time. We only have maybe 2 minutes left. Do we have a decision here? Maybe the group can summarize what we just talked about.
You said similarities.
The companies haven't said anything yet.
Yes.
Right. We're going to regulate you now. The citizens will come to your company every week to go through your AI generated.
You can show some results from your research.
Right.
You can compete.
Yeah, I think like your point was central of similarity. I mean, there are just many different ways of getting different people to be similar. I think like in the process, what we know is like the inputs to the system and the outputs of the system. So like you were saying, an output could just be measured, like do you approve it and do you like it? You can just do that at the end of the process. The other end would be like making sure the simulations themselves have fidelity, get the researchers involved, how do we design a test that matches the inputs to inputs. So I think like that's the space in which we're operating. It's not like specific.
So is the company going to provide any financial resources to cover the travel cost of citizens?
As the regulator, I'm going to demand that.
You're going to demand that?
Yes.
Okay. You're going to force the company to pay for their bus fees.
Don't you guys fear about like if a company, if a corporation hold this kind of like the right of defining what you're trying to define, like what you define humanity, and they cannot be
Or what kind of hotel do you want? Do you want our hotel?
No, it's not hotel, it's a different characteristic of the humans.
Yeah.
So
Have you been certified to be certified evaluator of human argumentation?
Well,
All right. I think we have, everyone, we have 1 minute left. 1 minute left for the discussion. Please wrap up your discussion.
Or like everyone who goes to the company has been fully certified.
yeah, this is also horrifying. If I'm not matching the like the perfect like framework, where I going?
Or do the citizens have to pay a fee for the certification?
No, but in that sense,
But the companies need to.
The companies always have to pay a fee.
in that sense, like it feels a bit like humbling because it feels like we are trading like privacy or privacy data into something like money. I value privacy.
now you value, but
No, money couldn't.
You don't want to work for the company. And then how about through regulators? Like regulators get paid by the company and they pay you. Of the discussion. Morris, I'm going to send you our transcript in a moment. Right. I just sent you in the email. All right, when we are waiting for Morris to come up with a final analysis, I want to invite Professor Francesco Verri from University of Zurich to share with you the AI deliberation results, which we used actually Aura, right, to analyze. So Morris, the floor is yours. We're waiting for you to share that.
Yeah, can I talk? Well, first, apology, I'm not there. I have some trouble today, but well, hopefully you enjoyed the roundtable. So I meant to talk about the different things, but now I'm presenting. So I ran a simulation about on the same question you have been discussing using an AI deliberative space. Let's call that this. Which, as you see, is a bit complex. So there is a lot of steps. I try to create this environment in order to satisfy deliberative principles of, if you want, like there is different steps, and each step doesn't work. Each step I try to maximize certain feature of each agent. So I create like 10 agents. And in order to maximize diversity, there is these 3 steps. So manually create personas, try to get different ideological perspective. Then I prompt the system and say, well, if it's not plural enough, can you create a new persona or maximize the personas? And as well, I split the participant into groups in order to allow participants to be more independent somehow. And as well, I try to maximize inclusion and equality. So I merge basically first each agent has to express their values. Then they have to discuss in small groups. I reshuffle the groups, and then they have to brainstorm in a plenary session. Then they have to express their opinion. They reshuffle the groups, and then re-express their opinion again, in a plenary session in order to really maximize the inclusion of different roles. So I can role playing, and as well the quality of the chance of each agent to have to speak properly, and. As well, I try to maximize reflection. So reflection, as in deliberative term, is individual reflection. So how each agent kind of learn about someone else's agent, and a group reflection. How I would say the output that is generated at the end of deliberation is kind of they are discussed in a plenary session. And then I ask a task to structure and I would say provide a report and to list to basically to say to make a decision first about the question, and then to list the argument pro and the argument against the decision, in order to as well to see whether there is a kind of way whether they reflect or not, whether they kind of. Well, first as well, in terms of see what the content of the decision. Well, I mean, in terms of content-wise, it's interesting that this deliberative experiment basically suggests to define a collaborative framework in which so there is a strong emphasis on a collaborative framework between in which AI can be inserted. So it's kind of say, well, rather than pointing on the AI role, strictly speaking, or whether a supporter or not, you say, well, he's a supporter, but it's important that the deliberative design is able to support this AI system. And that is kind of their suggestions of AI deliberation. So they point as well, interesting, on some principles of inclusion and diversity of participants. They provide some ethical consideration. They point on, they stress the idea of preserving the human roles, so kind of human on the loop understanding. But when we're looking at the cons of the when the counter argument, it's interesting that this kind of I would say, well, it's difficult to design these frameworks. That's kind of, it's very complex, but you point out some internal constraint. But it's interesting that the last point is basically saying that the possibility that to rely too much on human input might limit some of the efficacy of the gain associated with the AI system. Basically, say, well, maybe too much human is not good for AI system to make the AI system more, to exploit all the potential of the AI system. And in the system, I kind of automated the analysis as well, because I kind of try to check for the deliberative integrity of the analysis. And one of the issues that emerged from the literature, we can probably know, is that when we make LLM agent to deliberate together, they kind of end up in a, I would say, towards the baseline model understanding. So they end up often in on a consensual point, but as well they end up to what the LLM, say, belief before deliberation, say, kind of the design model. So that is kind of actually what's happened, if you see. So basically, the pre-deliberation, there were a lot of different opinions, and the post-deliberation, we have a very concentration of opinion, a consensus around the baseline model. So it's kind of an interesting findings. That is kind of corroborate about the decrease of polarization. The polarization, just look at the standard deviation of the opinion. I asked the agent to respond on like a scale survey, and then calculates this. And as well, I calculate a few other index. One is actually kind of an index that try to understand whether there was equal participation. So how many each agent participate in an equal way. Basically check word counting and check whether there is differences across the deliberative agents. And I calculate the Gini coefficient, and there is not much inequalities, I would say. And the last point I look was the DRI. Here I didn't really do, to be honest, a strict DRI, I would say, analysis, because I asked actually the system to produce a DRI survey in order to check whether they, and then I asked to respond pre and post. And but anyway, it can be an indication that DRI doesn't really work. I think Maurice already discussed about this. We observe in LLM that they don't really align with human in terms of reasoning, and there is not improvement during deliberation. And that is the case, actually. That's even if it's it's not, I would say, systematically run, but we can observe this same pattern. So there is not improvement of the RI is very low, and so it shows that there is not much reasoning. That's kind of a bit of everything. I don't know if I've been too long or it's okay. Hopefully I've been clear, because it's always a bit difficult to talk online.
Yeah, Francesco, thank you so much for sharing. Do you want to bring out the report you sent to us earlier, where there was some very simple scores to show how high quality or low quality AI deliberation is?
Okay, that's the report. Do you see the report? Yes?
We do see the report.
Yeah, that's what the report produced. It's kind of I asked to provide a general recommendation and provide exactly what the assembly recommended, and the key reason to support the recommendation and key reason against the recommendation. I ask this because that is usually what we do in citizen assemblies, and we ask to people to reflect during the report and to express as well a minority view if there is. And well, there is other bunch of stuff here. I ask pre and post surveys about opinions and check whether there is an opinion improvement. There is some people change opinion, but not many actually. I call about people, but they are agents. Sorry. Here's some demographic overviews and the process analytic. Here the Gini coefficients that will show that there is I would say equal participation from the agent. So if Gini coefficient is 1, there is one person dominating. Otherwise, there is here actually the number of words is 2,900. It's around probably an hour of discussion. That's kind of roughly. And here it's kind of the model bias analysis. So I quoted this paper, Taubenfeld, who analyzed that there is this trend when agent deliberates to go towards towards the baseline opinion. And that was the case. So I asked, basically I asked the agents to fulfill a survey, an opinion survey before and an opinion survey after. And then I ask a kind of baseline agents to do the same. And then I calculate whether there is a convergence. And there is a convergence. So agents tend to converge towards the model inherent bias regardless of the assigned persona. As well, here,
Francesco, I think we're ready to wrap up. Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, cool.
Francesco actually has 3 documents. Can I say if the audiences are interested in your documents, they can write to you to request those documents? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Thank you, Francesco. I think we have to wrap up the entire session. We're still running analysis on Maurice's computer. So I'll let Professor Simon Parrott to do the concluding remarks.
So yes, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. So today the panel was also organized by people from very different fields. That's, I think, one of the strengths that all of us meeting at CHI, we had people from communication, social sciences, design, and basically a lot of different political sciences as well. I want to thank everyone of the audience who came because I know it's a late afternoon session. So basically you need to really come for that. So I think we had a very fruitful discussion, but basically what I noted is all of us here seem to have good ideas about what the AI can do, when it should intervene in the process. Hopefully what we want is we want to make our users or participant life easier, but at the risk of them relying on the AI too much. And I think that's something that came out from the 3 transcript I could see, is basically we are very concerned because if the AI makes it too convenient, there could be convergence. And is it a good thing that people converge? Yes, if they organically want to converge, but if that's the AI that is making them converge because it's more convenient or because it always agrees with you and guides you, nudges you towards a direction, is something that's dangerous as well. So that's really something we want to be cautious about. We believe that there's more to be done on that, and we'd like again to thank you guys for coming today. I think maybe what could work for us to have more time to explore that could be to maybe plan a workshop at another CHI next time, so we have more time to discuss. Finally, just a word of warning that happened to me as well not too long ago is we like to do a lot of things, crazy nice things with AI, and as researchers, we like to do things that could be helpful, but we need to try to think also about what could happen if a company starts doing business on that, because as a researcher, when I design something that generates personas to help my users reflect and go more in depth, well, a company could use that also for other purposes. So we may want to think about the implication of what happens here as well. And that's basically something to keep in mind. It's a slightly dark note, but something we have to keep in mind because AI is something that brings a lot of people around. There's a lot to be done. So hopefully we can make deliberation better with a tiny bit of AI only when it's needed and basically not more or not too much of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me report. We have initial results. This is the mean score for the AI deliberation, 3.15. Guess what's the mean score for human deliberation? Better or worse? Worse. Slightly worse, 3.07. That's what we had. All right, okay, with that, we conclude the session. Well, humans, we have to do better next time. Thank you for joining. Enjoy the evening. Really love to see you all here, right? Hope to see you in the future, right? Thank you for our 2 volunteers who really help us to solve all these emerging problems. Thank you so much. See you.